Okay, look, it's 12:30 and we've got a lot to get through. So we might start straight away. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that we live, we work, and we love the Wurundjeri country. We acknowledge the custodians of its people and the privilege and responsibility to connect to country. We acknowledge the inspiration and the responsibility to design with country and her kin. So welcome everyone to our first Ask Me Anything. Now, we started this year revisiting our values, and one of our values was generosity. And we know that mentoring and coaching is not accessible to many people. So this is our way of giving back. This is our way of making what we do a little bit more accessible. We're here for an hour and we'll get through as many questions as we possibly can. It is being recorded and we will put it up on our website so that you can go back and revisit it. We've got a lot of questions that have been sent in already, have been emailed to us anonymously, but the chat is there. Please feel free to put up a question, or if one of our questions prompts something else, let us know and we'll try and get through it as well. And if you like this type of information, please subscribe to our newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday and it's full of information like this. So the first question that we got, and we're doing it in order of the questions that came in, is there a base cost rate for design studios? So it's a bit of a can of worms, but Greg, do you want to start with that? A base cost rate for your design studio?
Okey-doke. And welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. The hourly cost rate is based on your studio, which means it varies greatly across the industry, and it depends on a lot of different factors. But what we do know is that it sort of has a range between about $80 and $120. Now, that's the raw hourly cost rate. And I'll explain that a little bit more. The raw rate is really derived by looking at your expenses budget and dividing it by the number of possible billing hours per annum. So the approach we recommend for that is that you draw up an expenses budget to work out your cost rate. And the expenses budget you just base on your P&L from the previous year. You take that, you add in an inflation percentage. So you'd want to add maybe 5% to be sure. And that'll bump each one of those figures up a little bit. You round it up to whole dollars or whole tens of dollars. And that gives you your budget. Now, the thing about the expenses budget is a lot of people don't have what we consider a complete budget. So if you're, for instance, a freelancer and you're working from home, you've got a home studio, you should have still a studio cost in your budget. So go out, take a look at the nearest co-working space, work out what it would cost to position yourself there, add that in as an expense so that it gives you the scope that if you want to go down that path later, you can. You also make sure you add in things like expenses for staff. So if you're just on your own, there's nothing wrong with adding in something like a Friday pub lunch into staff expenses. But there should be staff expenses in there. There should be professional development expenses put in there, and there should be a marketing budget put in there, which covers your time to market the business. Now, as long as you've got that whole expenses budget worked out, if you then divide it by 1,240, which we calculate is sort of the average number of hours a year that you can bill working at a 70% productivity. And the 70%, so your cost rate will vary according to that percentage you choose. So we recommend 70 because we know it's pretty safe in this country, that you can work at that level and stay fresh. and you can actually generate a profit at that level. So out of all of that will come a base hourly cost rate. So that's sort of what the question is that's being asked. That's your base hourly cost rate. To take it any further than that, take a look at the DVC YouTube channel, which if you just Google.
I just chat.
Oh, great. Okay. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you will see there's a free video there on costing and pricing. It's a 1-hour presentation. It covers this in much more depth, but hopefully that answers that sort of basic level for that question.
Yeah, it's a hard one to do, talking a lot of numbers without writing them down. But I think the key point there is no one works 100%. If any costings you're doing, work it out at a productivity of working at about 70%, because a lot of people do their costings thinking that they're going to work 38 hours a week or 7.5 hours every
bill, yeah, that you'll bill all that time. Thanks for reminding me, Carol. That also brings up the issue that if you're a sole operator, it's very hard for you to bill at 70%, because you're doing absolutely everything. You've got nobody else backing you up on anything. You might have a bookkeeper, and that's about it. So you would, in that case, I would suggest a sole operator would work on a productivity rate of 60%. And the interesting thing we know is we've done these figures over and over again. Adding all those things in, changing those percentages doesn't bump the hourly cost rate up a lot.
But it does stop you feeling really guilty because you didn't bill a lot. You didn't bill 7 hours today. It's a reality check. The second question that came in was about copyright, and we get a lot of questions about copyright. And someone asked, they did a copyright for a new client, a logo for a new client, and they want to get copyright for the logo, and how much would that cost? So copyright, the general rule is the first owner of copyright is the creator. So as the creator, you own it. There's a few exclusions in the Copyright Act. Like if you're an employee for someone, the employer owns it. If you're a photographer, that's different. You can't own a copyright of a portrait of someone. So there's a few exclusions around photography, and a lot of governments have in their tender documents, they own copyright. Can be argued against. It's a standard clause, but many designers accept it. So let's put that to one side. Generally, the person who designed the logo owns the copyright. Generally, we assign copyright to our clients when they have paid the account in full. You should assign the copyright so that the paperwork is done. But you don't need to tell anyone that you've assigned copyright. There's no registration of copyright. It just, the client will use it. And in the same way, some people use the C in the circle, the copyright statement. It's not necessary. Some see it as a deterrent to say, this is copyright. That can work. You can put copyright owned by X next to it. Not necessary, but it can be a deterrent. So you own copyright. You need to assign it to your client. There's some exclusions. That's very different to trademark. Trademark is completely different because you do register a trademark, and you'd normally use a lawyer because you would do a worldwide search for that, and that does include a cost. We're not here to sell stuff, but I did do a lot of research in our What's the Risk ebook. It's $50 from our website. There's more information in that about trademarks and things like that. But basically, most of us who do logos for clients don't need to do anything else. Greg, going back to the question about productivity, is it approximately 50% for solo operators? Is that what you said? I'd set somewhere between 50 and 60% as a productivity rate for you. And it depends very much on
I guess, the complexity of the business that you've got. But you really shouldn't expect to get much more than 60% productivity as a sole operator. And the point about that is you do all your calculations based on that. If you happen to get 62% or 65% or 70%, it goes straight to your bottom line because you've actually calculated it on a lower level. So the safe is 60%. If you want to be super safe, put it down as 50, but largely the owner operator should be able to bill 60% of their time back to clients.
For the type of work you're doing as well, doesn't it? Because if you're doing a large project, like an annual report, where you sit down at the desk and 8 hours later, you've been formatting and building graphs and infographics, you're really, really productive that day. But if you have a whole lot of small jobs that you've got to come on and off and put some information into stream time, and then the productivity that day, writing emails to clients, estimating, that might be completely different. So it's kind of an average in that way. The next question we've got, I'm a designer with over 15 years experience. I'm now trying to transition from employee to business owner. One of the big challenges I've got is getting work, not doing the work, getting the work. So what are some strategies to meet and attract suitable clients? So I'll start with that. Greg, you jump in where I missed stuff. But I think the first stage is don't look for any client, because looking for any client is really, really hard. But if you work out what you do better than other people, like stop and think, what is your superpower? Do some work on your onlyness, do some work on your skill set, do some work on working out where you sit in the design industry and the kind of clients that relates to. And all of a sudden, it's much easier to get new clients because you're looking at a specific client sector or a specific group rather than anyone. So that's we call it pillars of excellence. And there's a few activities you can do around getting your pillars of excellence. And I think there's, if you look in YouTube, there's a one on positioning your business. And that's a really valuable one for those pillars of excellence. Look for other businesses in those pillars. And then look at the type of work you want. So a studio needs a mixture of work. It needs some work that will come in all the time. That is, it's almost like retainer work or a regular newsletter, or that client that always wants the same thing every month. That I know boring is batshit, but it pays the overheads. It's really, really valuable to pay those overheads. And even the best studios in the world has some of that work. May not be on their website, but it's the work that you can rely on. Then there's other work that comes in by organic, and that is the work by referral, the work by clients who moved to another, a client who moved employers, I should say, and have moved on. That's valuable. It's not within your control, but it's very valuable. The third part, so about 30% you want transactional, about 30% organic. The other 30% is work you market yourself to, work you position your firm to, work that really interests you, fits your skill set and suits your passions. And that's where your energy goes. And that's where your website is focused towards, that positioning work. So when you say one of the biggest challenges is getting work, when you narrow it down, it becomes a much easier challenge to do.
And am I right to go? If you really want to get serious about it, there's a thing called the design ladder, and some people that we've worked with before will know about this because we bang on endlessly about it. and it's covered quite a bit in the costing.
Bangs on endlessly.
Sorry?
One of us bangs on endlessly about it.
Okay. It's covered in the costing and pricing video on YouTube, and these are all free and accessible. But the design ladder allows you to take your clients and classify them from those that are just offering you transactional design to those that are treating you like you're a true business partner. And you can grade your clients according to that. So it's a good task to take that exercise that we show on that video, classify your clients, and work out which of them you might be able to move up the ladder. And the other thing that we show in that video on the ladder is the further you go up the ladder, the higher the price you can get for your work. So you can actually get new business from existing clients by extending the type of things that you're doing with them. And so the design ladder helps you do that. And I'd suggest you actually start with your existing clients to get new business and try and work on them. And the design ladder is one way to help you do that.
Yeah, I love that. So a couple of free things. Again, in the YouTube, we've got a recording up there on how to position your studio. There's another one on costing and pricing the studio. There's another one on using LinkedIn, how designers can use LinkedIn to get new clients. So that's all free on our YouTube channel. The other thing that's really worthwhile that I bang on about all the time is the Up to the Light UK survey. It's a survey that's done every year. It's called What Clients Think, and it's a third-party PR company who works with 100 design studios, advertising agencies, comms studios, and interviews their clients about what the clients want, what clients like, what clients think, something like that, what clients want. Anyway, it's about the gap between our perception and what they actually want. So it's called the Up to the Light, What Clients Think survey. It's gold. If you have a look at that, I think that's really valuable. There's a really interesting question, Greg, that's come in the chat. The graphic design industry seems to be dominated by hundreds of small operators. Why do you think we don't see the significant numbers of mergers and acquisitions like, say, they do in media, and I'd add advertising? Is the current state sustainable? So we've worked with quite a few design studios who have merged, not so much acquired others, but merged, and now there's 2, 3, or 5 partners. So, Greg, do you want to talk about that? Especially, is it sustainable?
Look, it's probably sustainable, but there's no real growth in the industry because of it. So what we know from our research is the model that exists here in Australia for design businesses is the same, certainly in the UK and the US and across Europe. And that is that vast majority are studios of less than 3 people. And that's probably about 85% of the businesses out there. So there is a massive number operating at that level. I don't know that they are actually ripe for merging. The ones that we've seen are those that are more like 5 or 6 and larger and wanting to merge with somebody else to gain new skills. It's fraught with all sorts of problems. And we've been around long enough to have seen this happen repeatedly over many, many years, where the mergers happen and people then discover the approaches, the ways of working, the personalities just don't fit. And I think that's probably the biggest stumbling block. And we've got a close knowledge of one that happened recently, where it just ended up that for not disparaging anybody, it was just a personality thing, wasn't going to work. We've seen it, most ridiculous attempts at amalgamations or mergers that you could see from the beginning would not work because of personalities. So I think there's a huge blockage there because it's so hard for, say a 5 or 6 or even a 10-person business to assess the true benefits of merging with another studio. And the secondary part of that is, I think 99% of design businesses in Australia describe themselves as branding. So everybody's offering much the same service. So they're really the only major reason to merge is to actually grow the number of potential clients and revenue. I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. We ran a practice where we got to 13 people, which was about halfway to what I wanted. It was about twice what Carol wanted. And the intent was to actually, I thought the magic number was around 20. This is quite a few years ago. But in fact, it didn't lead to much more profit, possibly a bit less. So I don't know that the larger businesses are necessarily more profitable. Perhaps the services they offer can be broader. But what we do know is if you're sitting around that 10 to 12 people, you've got the best chance of having a balanced lifestyle, creating good work and earning good money. So there's a sweet spot there that I think works. We're working with much larger studios. I don't notice that they're that much better off or people are that much happier or the work is that much better than the 10, 12 people studios. They just happen to do a lot more of it.
Mm.
So I think there's a sweet spot that we should aim for.
Yeah, sustainable is a really interesting word. So is working by yourself, is working solo sustainable? Yes, it is, but you need to be really smart about it. That we've seen just post-COVID, we have seen a lot of people who've just closed up shop, who've said, I've had enough, is this as good as it gets? And they've left to work in-house or be employed by another design studio. I think that we met a really interesting guy in San Francisco a number of years ago, Shel Perkins, who taught at one of the major colleges, and he was teaching his designers 7 or 8 years ago, I guess, to go out solo, but get a network straight away. So it meant that whatever project you worked with a cooperative of like-minded people who were you employed or you worked together for one project and then you all disbanded. So that's the Hollywood model or the theatre model. And he taught his final year students that practice right from the very beginning, saying that it's not sustainable to carry all of this by yourself, to carry working on a studio, to carry working solo. The mental health is not there. It's hard to be sustainable. So I think you have to do it with intent.
And it's interesting, Carol, you mentioned the post-COVID. We have this database of about 2,500 design businesses across the country that we would love to work with. And I compiled that well before COVID and kept it reasonably up to date. After COVID just after COVID, I decided to update it. What we discovered was that there was a hell of a lot of businesses had downsized. So the previously 20-person business was down to 12 or 13. The 30s were down to 20. The 10s were down to 5. So there's been a downscaling from what we can see of the size of design businesses in Australia. Don't quite know why. Have a few theories on it, but it's certainly happening. So, the whole idea of merging, growing bigger, I don't think has got a lot of traction in this country. It's probably the opposite.
It's interesting. Okay. We've got one on design strategy that came in, which is interesting because it's a little bit tied up with the AI question we've also got. So, and it is to do with as well that 85% of studios are 5 people or less. So this person is looking into diving into design strategy. Who does strategy well, and what are your top 5 recommendations on texts or places for informational workshops? I think strategy is vital for designers to know. I think the days of the ta-da, I've come up with this and ta-da, this is the answer for you. And in fact, there's a very, very, very funny animation series, I guess I'm doing the rounds on LinkedIn at the moment about brand strategy that was far too close to call for what we used to do. So everyone needs strategy behind their designs. That's no good just designing something based on subjective rather than objective. So yes, I think strategy is really, really important. Richie Meldrum's got his brand strategy course out at the moment. Honestly, you'd be enough not to do it. It's such, I've not heard a bad word about it. Everyone that comes out of it wish they had have done it earlier. So it's really, really good value by someone who really knows his stuff. It's not intimidating. It's really accessible. So that's the first point. Everyone jump in and do that. If you're doing anything around brand, you need to know strategy. Richie's brand strat course is all over LinkedIn, and I'm sure you could Google it. For free, I love Mark Pollard. You know, if you don't follow Mark Pollard and Sweathead, I find that his insights into insights, or how to find insights, really, really valuable. That's really easy. And, oh, there you go. Someone did their Richie Meldrum webinar years ago and thinks it's great. Thanks, Laura. And Jim Antoponoulos has got a strategy masterclass that I did when I closed McKay Branson Design before I joined Greg again at Design Business Council. I wanted to know whether there was a place for me. I didn't want to clone Greg. One Greg is far more than we need. So I didn't want to clone him. So I looked at the strategy to see whether there is a place for me. And I did Jim's strategy masterclass, and I found that really valuable. Completely different kind of learning. So it's very unstructured. So you jump into a whole lot of resources and work your way through, as opposed to Richie, who will take you along. And different things, brand strategy compared to Jim's is very, very broad. That's the 3 things I've got. I didn't get to 5, but they're, I think, good starting points. There's one on AI, Greg. Do you want to talk a little bit about the AI?
Yeah, what's interesting and it brings strategy into it is that Carol and I lived through the revolution of desktop publishing. And it was, we used to work in an office building we ran our studio from, and the secretary over the lane from us fronted up one day and said, "I've just bought Ventura for desktop publishing and I'm going to put you out of business." So there was this threat from desktop publishing, which it certainly wiped out 4 or 5 trades in the print industry. It had a massive effect, but designers managed to grab hold of it, and with the Mac, we took charge of it. So we've seen it happen before, and what we knew was that people who didn't embrace it were in strife. So we're saying that about AI. I think we need to embrace it. What we can see it'll do is that things like Adobe and Canva will gobble up all that low-end work. There's a hell of a, most studios, as Carol said, have got about 30% of their revenue comes from that transactional work. That's where AI will have the biggest impact, because clients will be able to do a lot of that themselves. So that transactional work is going to progressively decrease for many design agencies. So if you took 30% of your revenue out of your business, where would you be? That's the question. So what we're saying is design actually belongs further up the design ladder than transaction. We belong up there with being business partners, and that's where strategy comes into it. We need to at least get into brand strategy, but at best get into business strategy. And we now have in the design ecosystem, we have a classification called the business designer. These are designers who understand business, and they marry the two things together. Things like the business model canvas is a tool we see a lot of designers using to actually unpack the business before they start the branding exercise. So, and that's being strategic. I think designers need to get into that space to survive. And really, we should have always been there. We should have been on top of that all along, but we let ourselves slide down into the easy part, which is to just keep earning money from transactional work. But it will dry up. We will be in strife. We've got to push our services further up that design ladder.
I think it's part of working smarter, not harder. So one of the designers in our network has set up AI for their clients' regular weekly EDM, where they've set up a whole lot of assets and have found how to, the client can put together the assets and the text randomly by an AI program. So this designer no longer sets up the EDM weekly for them. The client can do it themselves, but they can access the assets and the copy, and they've got a program to help them do that. That's really smart. We're seeing a lot of designers who are using AI to do like the audits that we used to do before we started a branding project. We would do an audit of peers and competitors and what's out there. AI can get all of that together for you. So it's using it to do the labor intensive work. So I can see, George is a bit upset and saying that AI doesn't do good, great visuals. No, we're not here to compete with AI, with the visuals. And if clients want to get visuals from AI, then they're not the kind of clients that we want to use access that when we talk about positioning our studio to the type of clients we want. That would be one of the criteria to say that the type of client that wants to access AI for a stock image isn't the type of client who would want to pay for the strategy a designer does. I think that's a fair comment.
And the point we're making is it's that really low-end work that AI will definitely take away. It's already happening. Canva is doing a hell of a lot of it. So it's already removing that work from being offered to designers.
And I think
there's no doubt that will change it.
And that's the big difference, that Canva are directly promoting themselves to our clients. And that's been happening for a number of years, but now Adobe is directly promoting itself to our clients. And Adobe are democratizing design. I think that's where our threat will be when what was our program had a little bit of mystique about it is now accessible to everyone. That's why we need to move up a rung. That's why strategy is important. And yes, someone did a shout out, Sam, Mark Ritson's mini MBA. Absolutely. I should not have forgotten Mark Ritson.
How can you forget Mark Ritson?
No, I know. And if he was here, it would be rude about me forgetting him. So The AI is a really nice segue to clients wanting native files. We had a question about clients wanting native files and how to handle that. Did you want to start with that, Greg?
Yeah. Our suggestion is that you specify right up front whether you're going to supply them or not. And you make it very clear to them, and it should be pointed out as part of the estimate that the native files are not supplied. And the reasoning we suggest you use is that if you take an InDesign file you've laboured over, or even an Illustrator or Photoshop file you've laboured over, you've used all of your skill in building it. So there's a lot of smarts in there that you've built up over a lot of years. And it's those smarts that are encapsulated in that file. And handing it over hands over what we think of as your intellectual property. And we don't think you should do that. If you're going to do it, there has to be a fee associated with doing it. But all this needs to be explained up front. The people who have come to us with this question in mentoring usually have not explained up front what the situation is. And that's what gets them into trouble. So up front, in your terms, you state it. And I would be particular about pointing it out to the client that this is what you're going to get. If you want that, there is an additional fee to be negotiated. And that's...
Yeah, it's far more... You're far more able to negotiate from a proactive stance than a reactive. After a client you've done the job, and then a client asks for the native files. So if you can put it in the estimate, and I think more and more, the designers that we're working with are intentionally building files to hand them over. So it might be clients, we've got some designers who've embraced Canva and are building templates for clients in Canva, knowing they will be handing over. We're working with one designer at the moment doing a lot of work with an in-house studio, a very large financial business, on the basis that they do the smart work, they do the strategy, they do the look and feel, they set up all the files, and then they hand it over and they don't do the rollout. So that is all negotiated up front. It's exactly the kind of work the studio want to do. They don't necessarily want to do the rollout work. So they're building it with intention. What you don't want is, where I was caught a number of years ago with a magistrate's court, where afterwards they grabbed the file without my knowledge, it was styled to within an inch of its life. It was styled with, me having done 15 years of annual report artwork files, which made it very, very easy for them to use. That's really difficult to put a dollar sign on. You'd have to at least cover your artwork. You'd have to at least cover your design fee. So that's very different to, say, doing a Canva template for an EDM. So talking about exact money is really hard, but I think that the bottom line is there is embedded IP in it. Negotiate up front, negotiate proactively rather than reactively. The next question I think is really, really interesting, because it's something that we've been grappling with for a number of years, and it's one of the questions I have changed my stance on it quite often. Looking for new work. You've just set up your business and you're looking for new work. Is it free pitching if you go out to a client that is not your client? You go out to a client, you've redesigned something they've done, and you knock on their door and say, I've redesigned your magazine layout for Bell, and I'd like to show it to you. This is the kind of work I do. Can we have a meeting so I can talk through how I do something? Is that free pitching? Or is it entrepreneurial? So, Greg, do you want to go?
Okay. There's certainly a fine line in all of this. Our suggestion is that if you want to go down that sort of path as your way of marketing yourself, what you do is identify how many of those approaches you're going to make in a year. You work out how much time you're going to spend doing them, and you track that through your job management system or your studio management system. And you calculate that total number of hours, multiply it by your hourly charge out rate, not the cost rate, your charge out rate, multiply it by that. That figure goes back into your budget in your marketing line item that I spoke about earlier. So you might add $20,000 into your marketing budget to help you do that. That then spills out. I've done this exercise over and over again. It spills out. It might add $3, $4, at the most $5 an hour to your cost rate, which you then increase up through to your charge out rate. What that means is every hour you spend doing one of those pitches is already paid for. It's paid for through all of the hours you've sold to every client. So my point there is it's not a free pitch. The question is whether it's free for the client or whether they've not paid for it or everyone else has paid for it. But at the end of the day, you're not doing work for nothing. You've actually been paid for it. If everybody did that, it wouldn't be an issue. You could afford to go and do those pitches and show your work and show the way you do it. So that's my take on it. I know there'd be some argument out there. We've got some colleagues who so strongly come out against even that approach.
The difference between it's the power thing. So in a free pitch, if we were involved, a university asked 10 studios to pitch for a free, they want designs for a perspective, I think it was, can't remember. But anyway, 10 studios. In that case, the university has all the power. And me, as a designer, I had no power at all. So that is very definitely a free pitch because the university has all the power. In something like this, I think it's a proactive pitch. I think it's entrepreneurial because I have the power. I have the power to spend my time. And as Greg said, if I've done it well and I've got marketing in my budget, who's to say spending money doing Facebook ads to my client sector is a bona fide way to market myself, but pitching a design to a client that I want to deal with is not a bona fide way. That doesn't make sense to me. So I should be free to market myself how I want, as long as I'm in control of it, and that's a proactive pitch.
And Laura's raised a really good point. What we're talking about here is not the style of thing that Carol just spoke about, where they've got a job they want done, they call you in, and they say, we want you to pitch us on how you would handle this problem. We think you shouldn't be doing that. But if you want to proactively market yourself, like in the scenario Carol described, where you take an existing advertisement they've got and you show how you would think differently about it, and you then visualize it and go in and show it to them. And they're not going to gain from that. They'd not be given any files or anything like that. It's really a presentation back to them to show your type of thinking. And we consider that's not free pitching.
But I get your point, Laura. Absolutely. It is a really superficial way. I do not know their brand strategy. I do not know their business strategy. I do not know the brief of why the original product looks like it is. It is just a lever for me to get my foot in the door. So, yeah, it's not the strongest way of getting clients. It's not the way that I would get a client. Absolutely. It is just, yeah, it's just a lever. It's just one of the levers that we have. And I think the moral is, as long as you've got the power, then it's your right to market yourself how you want to do it. Okay. 15 minutes to go. We've got a number of questions left. If you've got anything you want to, a short, sharp question, let us know, because we can pop that in, because we've got a few really meaty ones. You can analyze how you would elevate it and discuss that. But yeah, exactly, Yvette, that might do. All right, we had a question about insurance, and really insurance is one of those things. I did the research for our How Bad Can It Get, the risk management ebook. I'm a bit war wounded. We had insurance for many, many years as key person insurance. And then when I needed it, they wouldn't cough up. So I am a minimum viable product insurance person. Reading between the lines of an insurance policy is really difficult. When our key person insurance would not pay, and I spread the word to our design network, a lot of the designers went to their brokers and asked the questions, and they found out they weren't covered either. So I think that it is buyer beware, and you do need a broker. I think that is and I'm saying this as someone who did the design work for an insurance company, a small boutique insurance company, for 25 years. You need someone to help you read between the lines. But basically, designers need workers' comp. You need to have your certificate of currency. You probably need general property and contents insurance for your studio. If you've got anyone coming to your studio, any clients coming, you probably need some kind of public liability to cover accidents to people in your studio. A lot of people say you need some kind of key person insurance to cover your ill health. That is really difficult. And that's where I came unstuck. But it's worth talking about when we are solo operated. Many solo operators are a small studio. What would happen if you are no longer able to work? In the same way, business interruption insurance to protect against loss of business income. So business interruption is different to key person, and that's worth the conversation. If you're working for the government, they will ask for professional indemnity insurance or product liability insurance. Again, fraught, because most often it will come down to often human error, and human error is not covered because they will say you didn't cover your processes and procedures. So yes, these are all insurances that you should look at. Yes, it's a gamble of how much insurance you pay and how much you are protected by. In the How Bad Can It Get, there is a case study that I quote about a website that was not launched on the day it was meant to be launched because of sickness, because of a subcontractor who didn't do what they said they were going to do. And they ended up launching a shell of a website, not the full website. And the website designer was sued by the client because the client lost that a lot of product sales they thought they would get on the launch day because the product was not up. Very possible, it's very possible. So that's what insurance is used for. How much insurance you get and how much you can save by not paying insurance that you can put in another offset account and pay for it. That's the conversation. Having said all that, yes, we are insured. I'm not an anti-insurance person. It's just buyer beware. You really need to need a broker to help you with insurance.
And we've found shopping around for a broker is vital. There's a great variation in the professionalism of insurance brokers, and I wouldn't ever again go through the process without really rigorous looking at the brokers. And we're in an apartment building here where it's only small, but I manage the owners' corporation. I spent hours and hours going through insurance brokers for this, and finally getting one guy who explained things so much better than anyone else, and we actually reduced our premiums. So, and that was only because I think in the end I went to 6 brokers. So it's a perseverance, but you've got to have it. And I think what you've got to do is really hunt round and find that broker who can do it for you.
And that's a really good point, Greg, because when we were caught, it was the bank's insurance, that because we had a business loan for the office we were buying, they wanted us to take out key person insurance. So, you know, buyer beware. We didn't shop around. We didn't read the final column. Laura's asked if anyone can recommend someone for public indemnity and public liability insurance. Pop into chat if you've got someone. I can honestly say we do not. That Laura's is appalling, and ours would fit that category.
We have a question here, and this is an interesting one. It's come from an architect, but architects face much the same problem as just about anybody else in the design industry when it comes to things like variations. And the question is, how is the best way to track and invoice hourly variations particularly when the project has a fixed fee agreement? Our response to that is that there's nothing wrong with fixed fee agreements. I think a lot of designers do it, but that has to be based on a scope that's very clearly defined, and you actually spell out every step and every deliverable, the number of meetings that you're going to have with them. And we get to review a hell of a lot of pitch documents, and we're seeing this more and more where there's a very detailed scope graphic that shows all the things they'll deliver, when they'll deliver, how many of them they'll deliver. And to me, that's the insurance on variations. The thing about variations, and this is why this is a really good question, is that the reason for variations can be so different. So is the variation occurring because the person who took the brief didn't get it right, or because the client changed their mind during the process? If you didn't get it right, if the person taking the brief didn't get it right, then it's rework. It's not a scope change. And you need to set aside, you've got a good job management system, you would record in that a job which is called rework, and into that rework you would be putting all of the details about the rework you've had to do, the variation, and you're then looking at why, and you're actually able to correct that action that caused that variation. Is it a variation because the studio got it wrong and the studio manager or whoever signed off on it before it went back to the client didn't actually go back to the brief and get it right according to the brief? So again, that's a rework situation. Or was it simply that the client changed their mind, decided they wanted something different? And in that case, your terms and conditions should spell out that any client requests for variations will be costed at the time before work is commenced. That's the safest way we know to handle variations.
Yeah, often it's scope creep, isn't it? And needs to be re-costed. Nice quick one here. How many designers are still working from home? That my employer wants me to return 5 days a week. This is a really interesting one. We're looking at, in the larger studios, the studios we're working with over 10 employees, I would say that most are working from the studio. Most people are going in 5 days a week and working from the studio, and they're loving that, they're loving the networking and the brainstorming and the being with fellow people. The studios with about 5 to 10 people are working about 3 days a week on site. That most of them are not working remotely all the time. Some are working 4 days a week. Most are working at least 3 days a week. We're getting a lot. It was interesting at the start of COVID. I did a survey alongside Stream Time, and there was a lot of people who were saying they loved it. They loved working from home. It was fantastic. They enjoyed the anonymity. They enjoyed the flexibility. Now we're getting a whole lot of solo operators saying we're moving back to having working from a co-working space or sharing a space with someone, because they're bored witless at home and they're feeling really lonely. So I think it's probably gone the full circle. There are some studios still working remotely, but even they are hiring the hub or the commons, or they've got a pod space there, or some kind of hot desk where they can go in there, or they can use the studio, or they all meet in a cafe or something like that. So it's not, I don't think as many people are working from home 5 days a week as they were, but they are certainly working. Not everyone has gone back to the studio 5 days a week either.
And we had 2 other questions, which are multi-part questions, and I went back to the 2 people who asked them and said, we won't be able to get through all of it today. And we intend repeating these monthly, so we will get to these things. But really the core of both the questions is about working out what should happen when you decide you need to employ somebody, whether it's your first employee or an additional employee. And how do you know when you need to do that person, and what's the best way to approach that? We've recently developed a thing called the Happier, Healthier, Creative Business Canvas, which we've done in conjunction with Streamtime and Andy Wright. Within that canvas, we've actually answered that question and shown how to use the canvas to answer it. So what we say is the first thing is to look at your risk capacity. How much are you prepared to risk? The point will be that you've got at least a 3-month salary risk in employing somebody. You can lay them off any time during that if they haven't performed, or if the work drops off, or whatever else. You've definitely got that 3 months, or you can specify it as 6 months. But it's just that is your salary risk. And so that's the dollar risk that you've got. You've got an added risk of the time you're going to have to put into that person to get them up to speed. So you need to calculate that in terms of lost revenue from your work. So you can calculate the dollar risk that's involved in that next employee or first employee. If you look at that dollar value and say, well, I'm not prepared to risk that, well, then your alternative is to work with freelancers and so with a freelancer, you should always be employing them on the basis of, I've got this to do, I will pay you that. I think it's 10 hours, I'll pay you that for those 10 hours. And it has to be a reasonable rate, usually what they're looking for, senior, about $90 an hour. So I'll pay you that. And we agree on that it's a 10-hour job. That's billed directly back through the system into the client. So there's no risk in that apart from the time you have to spend briefing. And you should build that back into your estimate. So if the risk is not one you want to take on, then that's where you go. The next is to take a look at, well, what is it you actually need somebody to do? We suggest there that what you do is analyse the work you're doing, analyse what you like and don't like, what you think you can more easily give up. That generates a job description, and that becomes the description for the person you're going to employ. And I think if you go down that path, there are a few other steps, but if you go down that path, you will cover the risk, and you've actually answered that question in part. The other things you would need to do is look at, well, if I'm going to employ somebody, is it a new chance to position myself differently by bringing in different services or talents? And what level am I going to employ somebody at? And that again boils down to the workflow and the type of work you're doing. So you need to analyse those things in order to make that call that you are going to actually employ somebody new.
Okay, and with that, that is a full hour of us talking. So I hope you found it valuable. We've still got a few questions that are left over. We'll do those carryover champions for next month. We haven't set a date for next month, but we'll do that in the next couple of days. It will be in our newsletter. So please, if you have not subscribed to our newsletter, please subscribe. Tell your friends. We're really trying to push it this year and lift our subscription number of it. And we'll make sure we have the next date in the newsletter. And you want to subscribe anyway, because this is exactly the kind of information we talk about every month. So thank you very much for coming and sharing your lunch with us. And we look forward to seeing you soon. See you.